Today we're going to continue looking at how the media works, and particularly how candidates and politicians actually use the media and make it work to their advantage. So our goals are to describe how politicians use the media to attempt to accomplish their goals, to explain the debate between image and issues, to describe the strategy used in a presidential debate, to describe the relationship between campaign spending and elections, and to describe the strategies used in political advertising. So first of all, using the media. Candidates know that they have to use the media. Candidates know that without the media, they cannot win. And so even though Donald Trump always complains that he hates the media and that they're awful and he has nothing nice to say about them, he knows that he needs to use the media in order to get his message out, and he's very skillful at doing so. Likewise, the media know that they need the politicians. Politicians provide the media with a job. If the media doesn't have access to information, then they can't do their jobs. And we'll take a look at this relationship with George W. Bush and his relationship with the media.
That was a good one.
Do you think that there's any significance to the orange rolling slump that you're in?
No, I mean, first shot all the way down the bottom. Plus, Alexandra, I want you to know, we dedicated the orange today to you. It said, "We love Alexandra." It didn't actually say love. It had a heart on it. That's a universal symbol for love. You're the orange of my eye.
But it's conditional love. One condition is that I can't ask him about the record number of executions taking place in Texas.
You're sure, you sleep at night knowing that everyone that has been put to death on your watch was completely guilty of that crime?
Alexander, let me put it to you this way. I'm sleeping soundly at night. Thank you for the question. See you all later.
This is what happens when you bite the man who feeds you.
I'm not answering your questions.
Why not?
Because you came after me the other day. You went below the belt.
So now he's teaching me the rules of engagement. If I throw him a hardball, he'll push me into the outfield. And it's my job to maintain my network's relationship with the candidate.
And in this election, NBC News has now projected that George W. Bush is the substantial winner of the South.
So what you see with that article or that little episode is that, again, the media need the candidates and the candidates need the media. If the candidate revokes access to the media, then he or she can't do their jobs. One of the most skillful presidents at using the media, and really one of the first presidents to use the media, is sometimes who is known as the first modern president, Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt, as you remember from U.S. history, used what he called the bully pulpit. The pulpit being, of course, a place where a priest or a minister might speak in a church, and bully, of course, meaning that he has control of it. He's going to bully the media. Teddy Roosevelt knew how to get what he wanted out of the media, and that's what made him such an effective communicator. Of course, in the Roosevelt family also is FDR. Now, sometimes FDR gets the credit for being the first modern president because he followed in Teddy Roosevelt's footsteps, and he used the media probably more skillfully than any other president who had come before him. He had his regular, what do you remember from U.S. history? Oh yes, fireside chats, or what today we would call a press conference. Back in the day, people would huddle around the radio, around their fireplaces, and they would listen to FDR talk about policy. His first fireside chat was how do you fix the banking system during the Great Depression. And so this was his way of directly communicating with the people. Now, as you'll notice, presidential press conferences have actually gone down considerably over the course of the last 20 or 30 years, mainly because presidents don't do the talking for themselves anymore. Today, they rely on other members of their cabinet and also on the press secretary to convey their message. And so we get a daily update from Donald Trump's press secretary, but Donald Trump doesn't very often address the nation as a whole. And that's just because of the increasing role that the press secretary plays in the media. So if you want access to the president, you must go through the press secretary. So I've got a question for you. What matters more, image or the actual issue? And I want you to explain your answer. Well, my guess is many of you said that the true important thing is the actual issue, But if we actually look at what recent politics tells us, it's more important that you have a good image. This one cracks me up. During the presidential election of 2008, Barack Obama would often be seen wearing an American flag lapel pin, the little pin that goes on the corner of your suit. And for one debate, he decided, for whatever reason, maybe he forgot it, maybe he just didn't feel like wearing it, who knows. But for whatever reason, he came out during one debate without a lapel pin, and this is the way the American public responded.
The pin. What a moron. The pin. You want to be the leader of one of the greatest nations on earth, and he took his pin off. If Americans have become that lax that they can let that slide, I'm sorry, I won't do it. That's the time to stand up. And that broke my heart for him to do that.
Yes, Americans, what really matters? That your president is wearing an American flag pin. So you just see just that one instance, and there are hundreds of them that we can find, where the image, what a president looks like, sometimes matters more than the actual issue. This is from House of Cards, and you'll see basically the same thing. The president's wife is worrying very much about what her image looks like, all the way down to what her hair looks like.
Why did you change your hair back to blonde?
That's your burning question?
I'm curious.
How does that help the book?
Who knows? But right now I got nothing.
We changed it because blonde pulls better with the voters.
We?
There's a whole gaggle of people that weigh in on how you look and what you wear. Whether an event calls for heels, earrings, no earrings.
You hate it, don't you? Campaigning.
Everybody hates campaigning. Except for the politicians, they feed off the energy.
And their spouses.
You think Francis feeds off me?
You are literally giving your blood.
Plenty of people give blood who aren't married to politicians.
Yes, once again, you can see that every aspect of a candidate, and even the candidate's wife, is manipulated. Probably the first president to really do these manipulations was President John F. Kennedy in the Nixon-Kennedy debates. These were the first debates that were ever seen on TV. And prior to the debate, they asked Richard Nixon, do you want to put some makeup on, and do you want to get ready for TV? And he said famously, nobody's going to package me, nobody's going to make me put on an act for television. Richard Nixon just wanted to be himself. Well, let's see how far being himself got him. And the answer is not too far. The Nixon-Kennedy debates occurred at a time when Richard Nixon had the flu. He was sick. These were the early days of television when everything was black and white. So Richard Nixon was coming off having the flu. And when you have the flu, you know, you tend to sweat. And so one of the things that you'll notice in the video in a minute is Richard Nixon sweating profusely. The other thing, and then when he tries to wipe the sweat away with his handkerchief, that looks awkward. The other thing you'll notice is Richard Nixon doesn't have a lot of makeup on, and so his face will blend in with the seemingly white background. You'll also notice that he's wearing a gray suit, which blends in with the background. On the other hand, if we look at John F. Kennedy, we'll see that he's wearing a black suit. He's got lots of makeup on, and he contrasts very heavily with the background. So what matters less is not even what's being said in the debate itself, but just looking at what the candidates look like. Look at Richard Nixon sitting there. He looks kind of nervous, doesn't really know what to do with his legs. He's a little bit awkward. He just doesn't look very comfortable sitting there. And you can see he's going to take his handkerchief and wipe his face off. On the other hand, on the left-hand side, we've got John F. Kennedy, and he looks very comfortable seated where he's at. So we can fast forward a little, and we look at Kennedy. Look at the way the camera angle just shows his face. The suit is protruding from the background. You got the nice dark suit. You've got the makeup on his face. He really stands out among a crowd, and he very much looks presidential. On the other hand, we've got Nixon with the far-off view, and he's kind of standing there awkwardly, waving his feet. His face kind of blends in with the background. He's sweaty because he's got the flu, and hot lights from the press are beating on him. He just doesn't really look all that comfortable. And at the end of the day, voters thought so too. when we look at the end of the Nixon-Kennedy debates, when they actually asked people what they thought of the debates, everybody who watched on TV said by far that John F. Kennedy was the winner. But when you asked people who were listening to the radio who they thought won, they said it was Richard Nixon. Why such a different result? Well, because it all was based on looks. People thought that President Kennedy looked more presidential in the debate, where Richard Nixon just looked awkward. And so politicians know this today. Back in the day, they didn't. And Kennedy was the first president to really modernly use the media that way. Nixon made a huge error in not letting his people use the media. The key to success when it comes to the media is using the media to get your message across. And candidates today have what are known as media events. They're not just appearances. Every single thing that a candidate ever does is staged. It's planned. Everything you see, everything they do is done very purposely. Now, all this stuff is made to look spontaneous, look like it wasn't pre-planned, but every single thing that the media does is done on purpose, and every single little thing that a candidate does is staged. For example, if you look at this picture of Barack Obama on the right, what do you notice about the background? Well, if you said they're all women, yes, it was probably a women's rally that he was at, but the other thing you probably notice, yes, there is a great diversity of women behind him. There are African Americans behind him. There are white women behind him, Latinos. You've got every single race possible standing behind the president, and that is no accident. I had a friend had a couple of presidential candidates come to her place of employment, and she said that when they came by, they were actually arranging where people stood, and so they wanted to make sure that people of different races were standing in certain spots. I went to a campaign once, and it was the craziest thing, made to look spontaneous. When I walked in, they gave me a poster, and it had the candidate's name on it. It was pre-written out. It looked like somebody had handmade it, but in actuality, it was pre-made. And so whenever the people came on TV, they would see me holding up this sign that it looked like I made, but really it was the campaign staff that made it. That's how managed media events are. Everything you see in a debate, nothing is accidental. Every little idiosyncrasy is negotiated in a debate.
On October 27, 2000,
this is a fictitious debate, but the idea is the same.
Paul Green, the two candidates running for President of the United States, finally met in the offices of the National Commission on Presidential Debates. For weeks, the only thing the campaigns could agree on was that they were anxious to debate, and it was the other guy's fault that they hadn't. But with the election less than 2 weeks away and the candidates neck and neck in the latest poll, both campaigns gave into the inevitable and agreed to one debate.
Right out of the gate here, like absolutely no audience participation. That's one thing. You know, I don't want another goddamn clown in a ponytail asking stupid questions. Thank you. I mean, this just has to be a moderator and 3 panelists, and that's it.
Well, since your guy's so afraid of communing with the little people outside the Beltway,
well, our guys
let them
aren't
address
afraid
each other for an hour.
Everything about a debate is negotiated, from the camera angles to whether the candidates stand or sit. And nothing is agreed until everything's agreed.
Okay, we've made up a list of possible panelists. I'll contact them as soon as you agree on them. We recommend the first 4.
They're all fine with us?
Yeah, well, hey, first of all, there's no way we're going to allow Don Beard to moderate. He's a Democrat.
That's bullshit, and you know it. He's heaping a hell of a lot more crap on us than he is on you every night at 6:30.
That's because he's the most trusted man in America. But come on, the guy's wife worked as a volunteer in the Kennedy, Johnson, McGovern, Carter and Mondale campaigns. Come on, the poor soul even labored for Dukakis.
Nancy.
We can't force either of you to choose anybody.
Okay. How about Joan Naylor?
I have no problem with that.
How about Mara Liasson or Barbara Manning?
Are you nuts? They're libs through and through. See, but hey, who on this list isn't? Seriously. What I don't understand is why you people aren't, jumping up and down and pounding this table insisting on diversity. Or does that only matter when it helps you?
You are so foolish. Next.
I told you up front I would not accept Joe Naylor. Now, why on earth did you agree?
Sorry, Governor. It was the best we could do under the circumstances.
She hates me, Brad. You heard her the other night. You heard her say, Paul Green is rapidly writing his name in the political history books as a single worst campaigner of all time.
She was quoting somebody. Gwen, tell them what would happen if it...
They would have killed us, Governor. The editorials, feminist talk
Meredith
shows.
would look...
Good luck in her.
Sure.
It would become the story.
Meredith would look like a champion of women's rights. Now, again, I apologize, but I'm sure she'll be professional.
And we talked them into accepting Barbara Manning. We know that we can count on her to gun for Meredith.
More importantly, Wednesday, you're going to prove why you deserve to be president more than that moralizing pundit who's never kept a real job in his life. And
I'm the one they called.
Let's be honest. They only called you because they needed a conservative brown face.
You are going to be getting a call in a few minutes from Nancy Dewey.
It finally happened.
Well, not exactly. They want you on the panel, only they're asking Mike Howley to moderate.
Howley? But he's a pundit.
That's what I said. And they said the Washington Herald isn't exactly chopped liver. Look, bottom line, dear friend, is that they are worried about ratings, and Mike Howley has a higher TVQ than you do.
So there you have it. Every little aspect of a debate is planned and pre-planned and debated on before you ever actually see it. Nothing is spontaneous. Everything is pre-planned. And as George W. Bush once said, the interesting thing about a presidential debate is that I don't think you can ever win them, but you darn sure can lose them. Because debates are there to reach to the undecided voters. Basically, if we look at America, we said that roughly about 30% of people always vote for the Democrats, roughly 30% always vote for the Republicans, and the other 30 to 40% of people in between are undecided. They are the swing voters. They are the ones that debates are designed to reach. So debates are not really playing to the audience. They're playing to the middle ground. And every part of that is pre-planned. Again, candidates focus on the image, what they look like, and most often they ignore the question. In fact, if they don't like the question that's given to them, they won't even answer it. They'll just talk about whatever they feel like talking about. And these are what are known as talking points. So here from the 2016 presidential debates, you'll hear Donald Trump is asked a question and listen to him not answer the question, but just talk about whatever he feels like talking about.
Take a look. Excuse me. You're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars.
No, you're not.
If we went out to the proper bid. Of course you are.
No, you're not, sir. Let's put up full screen number 2. You say that Medicare could save $300 billion a year negotiating lower drug prices. But Medicare total only spends $78 billion a year on drugs. Sir, that's the facts. You're talking about saving more money on Medicare.
I'm saying saving through negotiation throughout the economy, you'll save $300 billion a year. And that's a huge, of course it is. We're going to buy things for less money. Of course it is. That works out.
The only money that we buy, the only drugs that we pay for is through Medicare.
I'm not only talking about drugs, I'm talking about other things. We'll save more than $300 billion a year if we properly negotiate. We don't do that. We don't negotiate. We don't negotiate anything.
Can I?
So there you have it. He completely ignored the question. He is not the only one to do so. Let's look at the other side.
You've been endorsed, Secretary Clinton, by 2 of the biggest teachers' unions. There's an awful lot of great teachers in this country. It's an incredibly difficult job, one of the most difficult jobs there is. But union rules often make it impossible to fire bad teachers, and that means disadvantaged kids are sometimes taught by the least qualified. Do you think unions protect bad teachers?
You know what? I am proud to have been endorsed by the AFT and the NEA, and I've had a very good relationship with both unions, with their leadership, and we've had really candid conversations because we are going to have to take a look. What do we need in the 21st century to really involve families, to help kids who have more problems than just academic problems? A lot of what has happened, and honestly, it really pains me, a lot of people have been blaming and scapegoating teachers because they don't want to put the money into the school system that deserve the support that comes from the government doing its job.
So once again, she completely ignored the question that was asked of her, and she talked about whatever she wanted to talk about, which are the talking points, what she thought was important. So the next thing we're going to look at are what are known as zingers. Zinger is a soundbite. It's a form of a soundbite. So in the 1988 vice presidential debate, Lloyd Bentsen said this to Dan Quayle.
I have as much experience in the Congress as Jack Kennedy did when he sought the presidency. I will be prepared to deal with the people in the Bush administration if that unfortunate event would ever occur.
Senator Benson?
Senator, I served with Jack Kennedy. I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy.
That's a zinger. That's a soundbite. That's a one-liner that's going to make all the TV news. Here's another one. I don't think that Senator Dole is too old to be president. It's the age of his ideas that I question. Bill Clinton in 1996. Again, another zinger, another quick one-liner that's going to make the TV news. So one of the big things that a lot of candidates do when they debate is they just kind of make stuff up and they don't tell the whole truth. And so we can look at some examples from recent debates, and you can go onto websites like PolitiFact and other websites and check to see, is what the candidate's saying true? Is it wholly true? Is it partially true? Is it kind of sort of true? Or is it completely false? And if we look at the debate on October 22nd, 2012, we can see that only about 16% of things that Mitt Romney said was 100% true, roughly 28% half true, and 9% completely false. President Obama, about 22% true, about 26% half true, and about 2% complete lies. So you can see both candidates tend to stretch the truth a lot in their campaigning. All right, looking at political ads. Political advertising is done just the way that regular advertising is done. And basically what people have tried to do is they studied cults. They wanted to see how cults respond, and they use this in making their ads. And so what we're going to look at now looks at making regular advertisements, but keep in mind that this stuff could all be applied to politics as well. This is from a series known as The Persuaders. So when we look at mass media, pretty much everybody knows that it's all about the image. It's all about making a candidate look good. We've already established that it's not about the issue. It's not about what the issue says. It's about how do we build the candidate's image. And part of this is managing the mass media. We know media is important, and we know that campaigns seek to manage the media. In 2008, campaign spending was about $1.6 billion. If we look at it per vote, Barack Obama spent $10.94 per vote. John McCain, about half of that. We've already talked about the fact that money doesn't buy elections, but campaign spending, spending this billions and billions of dollars, $2.4 billion in the election of 2016, well, most of that is spent on TV. 60% of all campaign spending is spent on television ads. So let's look at how those ads are made and what those ads could look like. We have two different types of ads. First, a positive ad. A positive ad, you guessed it, portrays the candidate in a positive light. Usually it's when the candidate focuses on him or herself, and they focus mainly on the issues. They focus on the things that they have to bring to the election. Of course, the opposite, which is more than 2/3 of all ads today, are what are known as negative ads, or sometimes they're called attack ads or mudslinging. And in a negative ad, instead of talking about how great you are, you generally try to demonize your opponent. You try to talk poorly about your opponent and, well, attack him or her. And so let's take a look at the evolution of political ads. Now this is from 1988. I know it's a little old, but it will give you an idea of what ads looked like, and it's still pretty good even if the ads are a little bit old.
Well, while there has been divided opinion about the effect of the polls and the proliferation of them, almost everyone agrees that television commercials this time around were the worst of the television age of campaigning. Those that were effective were misleading or exploitive. Others were confusing. Most were negative. They were attack ads. Altogether, the television campaign managed to do what many thought impossible. These political ads made commercials for false teeth, toilet cleansers, and junk food look dignified by comparison. Where did all of this begin? We asked NBC's Ann Rubenstein to take us through the history of television political campaigning.
Ah, the good old days when a presidential candidate could jingle his way to the White House.
I'm for president, you like Ike, I like Ike, everybody likes Ike for president.
1952, the first...
So what kind of ad is that? You guessed it.
First political ads for TV. They stuck to the issues and were so innocent.
Food prices, clothing prices, income taxes, won't they ever go down? Not with an $85 billion budget eating away on your grocery bill.
What changed it all? According to Professor Julian Cantor of the University of Oklahoma, the Johnson-Goldwater race.
In 1964, the Johnson people recognized that voters make their decisions emotionally, not intellectually, and they determined that the way to motivate voters was to make commercials into political mini-dramas and to make them dramatizations.
Johnson wanted to paint Goldwater as a warmonger, and without even mentioning his name, this is the ad that did it.
8, 9,
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
These are the stakes. To make a world in which all of God's children can live, or to go into the dark. We must either love each other or we must die.
Tony Schwartz created this.
What type of ad is that? Yeah, that was a little dark. That was a little creepy almost. Vote for the candidate or you'll die. Your kid will get blown up by a nuclear explosion.
Ad for IBM 3 years before the election.
I thought the simplest use of numbers in our society was a child counting up. The most complicated use of numbers was the countdown on the nuclear bomb. So I did that for IBM, and they didn't take it.
It found a home in politics. Because the Daisy ad was so startling, and some say so unfair, it only ran once on TV, but it left an important legacy. That the surest way to win the vote of an undecided, make them feel something they'll remember, positive or negative. Personal attacks were memorable in 1968. A vice presidential candidate was an issue and was ridiculed. Character became the focus during the Watergate scandal, a 1972 McGovern ad.
This is about hidden funds. This is about deception. This is about the White House. And this is how you stop it. With your vote.
Nixon was tougher.
In Florida, he was pro-busing. In Oregon, he said he would support the anti-busing bill now in Congress. Last year, this year. The question is, what about next year?
4 years later, 1976, some of the most effective ads were still personal, but positive.
We're living here in peace again. We're going back to work again. It's better than it used to be. I'm feeling good about America.
And the Republicans raised those flags again in 1984.
It's morning again in America.
The technique was lifted
Today,
from Pepsi
more men and
commercials.
women will go to
Those
work
pretty
than ever
pictures
before
made
in
us
our
feel
country's
good, enough to re-elect Ronald Reagan.
Rates at about half the record high.
Which brings us to the present. It's generally agreed that this ad has been the most detrimental to the Dukakis campaign, and it was one of the most frequently used negative ads on national television. The Democrats used their share too.
And now George Bush wants to put Dan Quayle in charge for the next 4 years.
And as long as the consultants believe that negative ads work, you know they'll be back in 1992. Ann Rubenstein, NBC News.
Okay, so obviously a little bit dated, but it still gets the message across, and you still had a good sampling of both positive and negative ads. Okay, well, we've already watched the Daisy ad, so we can skip this right now and move on to a couple more, and I want you to tell me what kind of ad is this.
I am confident that we can steer ourselves out of this crisis.
Then who's been in charge of the economy? We need a rescue plan for the middle class. We need to provide relief for homeowners. It's going to take a new direction. If we keep talking about the economy, we're going to lose.
I'm going to do something to government. I call it the smaller, simpler, smarter approach to government. Getting rid of programs, turning programs back to states, and finally making government itself more efficient. I'm going to get rid of Obamacare. It's killing jobs, and it's keeping our kids from having the bright prospects they deserve. We have a moral responsibility not to spend more than we take in. I'll make sure that America is a job-creating machine like it has been in the past. It's high time to bring those principles of fiscal responsibility to Washington, D.C. I'm Mitt Romney, and I approve this message.
Yes, that one was tricky, so it's a little bit of both. The beginning, of course, was an attack ad, a negative ad, but the end, the candidate actually focused on the issues and talked about why you should vote for him, so that would make it also a positive. Alright, so when it comes to creating an ad, advertisements are created just like brands are created. Some of the most clever advertising makes you feel like you're part of a politician's brand, makes it popular to be a fan of that candidate. One of the things that made Barack Obama's campaign so impressive is the fact that he took people and made it cool to be a fan of Barack Obama. So whether you like him or hate him, whether you agree with the issues or disagree with the issues, President Obama made it popular to follow President Obama. And this is exactly what political advertisers try to do. They try to find words that make things popular. And so one of the ways they start out is by using what are known as focus groups. They'll get a group of 5, 10, maybe 15 people together, and they will ask them how they feel about a variety of different issues to try to figure out what the right word to use is, or what the right issues to focus on are. And based on those results, they'll apply them to the broader public. They'll apply them to the bigger picture ideas.
That's why modern political campaigns have also come to rely on an army of pollsters and market researchers, all taking the moment-by-moment pulse of the man on the street.
If an electricity company stood up and said, we want to do it for your benefit, we want to do it for our benefit, we want to do it for everyone's benefit, and so we have a better approach.
Tonight, Luntz's client is not a candidate, but a Florida utility wanting to build public support for a change in how it's regulated on the environment.
I know that the public is very down on corporate America in general, and they're down on power companies. So what is the language? What is the information? What are the facts? What are the figures that would get Americans to say, you know what, my electricity company, it's okay? 21st century technology. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sound science.
Luntz's specialty is testing language, finding words that work.
Integrity. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Reliability. There's the other one.
An art that even his political opponents seem to grudgingly admire.
Frank Luntz doesn't do issues. He does language around issues. He figures out what words will best sell an issue. And he polls them, and he tests them, and he focus groups them, and he comes up issue by issue with how to talk about it and how not to talk about it.
If the language works,
right, absolutely. No, it's just amazing.
Luntz has sold his corporate and political clients the idea that a few carefully chosen words can make all the difference. But he's not just looking for any words. Luntz's quarry are those words that grab our guts and move us to act on an emotional level.
I mean, it's amazing that those two words, and almost everything that we do, come up at the top.
So why do you think that companies don't use them enough?
I don't know.
And that's basically how a focus group works. Now, one of the ways that Luntz does his thing is with dial meters. One of the more sophisticated things you'll see on a lot of post-election polls is they'll have you rate how strongly or how disstrongly you feel. So the higher the number, the happier you are, and the lower the number, the more displeased you are. And basically they will use these as a way of measuring how you feel about certain words. And they'll actually show a speech live, and they'll have the people twist the dial as they go through various parts of the speech.
You're going to use these to register whether you agree or disagree, whether you believe or disbelieve. The dials go from 0 to 100.
On one hand, you have wind, which has no fossil fuels associated with it.
To get at his subjects' gut feelings, Luntz has them register their moment-by-moment responses to a speech by a power company executive.
Climbing, changing fuels.
But watching Luntz work, I couldn't help wondering, do the words he's found help the public see the issue more clearly, or do they disguise it? Is Luntz listening to us so his clients can give us what we want, or so we can figure out how to make us want what they have to sell?
The words work. The words apply to the policy. This is how we're going to sell it.
And there you have it. That's how candidates measure what they are going to use in their advertisements. So now we'll take a look at House of Cards and how they evaluate different words before the president uses them in a speech.
Negligence, nepotism, misappropriation of federal funds, a foreign policy fiasco, and loose with the truth. What do these five fingers have in common? Francis J. Underwood.
Mr. King, I would like to respond to that.
This is a man who believes in the rule of law, ish, the legislative process, ish, the Constitution, ish. Is this the man who should be president?
Miss Dunbar, like any good lawyer, you have a knack for rhetoric, ish, but the American people are tired of words. What they crave is action. My concern about focusing on the word action is that she'll just come back with failed actions. America works, the UN mission.
Action performed well with key demos in our last poll.
Yes, but doesn't this take us off message? We have been saying a vote for Frank Underwood is a vote for America works. That's what we've been running on.
You need a word that goes beyond America works, something that can be used for anything.
Remy, what do you think? We're talking about the word action.
Sorry, my mind was on the foreign policy argument. I was just thinking ahead.
What about vision?
Isn't that too generic?
Well, that's what we want. I mean, the more generic, the better. People can project anything they want on vision.
I'll get it polled before tomorrow.
And there you have it, how word choice matters. Something like Make America Great Again is another idea of a vague word choice that really doesn't say much of anything. People can make of it whatever they want. Change and hope. Those are other words that are very famous from campaigns that were specifically targeted to focus groups and demographics. They polled well, and voila, you have famous campaign words. When it comes to making a campaign, basically what they're trying to do is build a brand. The same way that they would try to sell products, they try to sell candidates. And so we're going to take a look at branding now. These, of course, are not necessarily for political branding, but the same theory can be applied. And so if we look at branding, originally, back in the day, if you watched a commercial in the 50s or the 60s, everything was an ER word. It was a descriptive word. It told us what something was. Brighter, newer, older, cloudier, whatever your word may be, those are the words that were used. Today, though, it's all about creating emotion. And so you might see a commercial that has absolutely nothing to do with the product that's being sold, but it gets you to feel emotional. It gets you to like the product. And that's what advertisers aim for today. It is like building a cult. So, take a look at this.
Look at the coffee as it gets darker and stronger.
Not so long ago, the high-concept ads of today were all but unthinkable.
Soap has never smelled this good before, and neither have you.
Ads laid claim to real, tangible differences between one product and another.
What were brands? They were based on what I call ER words. Whiter, brighter, cleaner, stronger.
Smoothest, mildest, tastiest cigarette.
Watch any commercials on American TV and you'll see these words up in the first 3 seconds, hammered remorselessly into your brain.
But at some point, these words ceased to have meaning. We no longer believed that one product was any brighter or cleaner than any other.
Everything works now, you know. French fries taste crisp, coffee's hot, beer tastes good, unless you live in America, and then, you got to live with what you get. But all these things now are table stakes.
By the early 1990s, a new approach to marketing came to the fore. One that leapt right over what the product did to what the product meant.
It's not just a car, it's an expression of the culture, an aesthetic that is connected somehow to nature, infinity.
Yeah, nothing about cars in that ad.
Super brands like Nike, Starbucks,
the Body Shop. And what they noticed these brands had in common was that they were they were engaging in a kind of a sort of pseudo-spiritual marketing. So Nike said that they were about the meaning of sports, but more than that, that they were about transcendence through sports. Starbucks said that they were about the idea of community, a place that is a third place, that is not home, not work. Benetton was, of course, selling multiculturalism, racial diversity.
This lesson, that a brand could forge an emotion.
So that's a little bit about branding. Essentially what you saw is creating a brand is about creating a culture. And the root word of culture is, you guessed it, cult. Advertisers treat you as if they want you to join a cult. But instead of a cult that supports or worships somebody or something, the cult is all about their product. So it's all about getting to your heart, not just focusing on your head. It's about creating an emotional attachment to a product. Coke is, with their sayings that they put on their bottles, are now even putting people's names on the bottle. That's a way to create a sense of attachment with the product. And so you want to buy the product because it is personalized and attached to you. Essentially, they view you as a member of a cult. And if that's a scary thought, here you go.
It is the big monopolistic.
Ad strategist Douglas Atkin, an expert on the relationship between consumers and brands, says he had a eureka moment one night during a focus group.
I was in a research facility watching 8 people rhapsodize about a sneaker. And I thought, where is this coming from? This is, at the end of the day, a piece of footwear. But the terms they were using were evangelical. So I thought, if these people are expressing cult-like devotion, then why not study cults? Why not study the original? Find out why people join cults and apply that knowledge to brands.
I'm loyal to this practice because it's done so much for me.
If Atkin could find what pushed a person from mere fan to devoted disciple, perhaps he could market that knowledge.
Most of the people I discuss the WWF with know that it's not a sport. Right. It's a masculine ballet.
So he compared dozens of groups he considered cults with so-called cult brands, from Hare Krishna to Harley Davidson.
If you're smart and kind of individual, that's what you drive.
From Falun Gong to Mac.
I think there's something about Mac users, like they get it.
We just had discovered something.
They realize there are other people like them and they cooperate on certain projects. And it's part of belonging to the tribe.
And the conclusion was this, is that people, whether they're joining a cult or joining a brand, do so for exactly the same reasons.
That's a little creepy.
And they want to make meaning. We need to figure out what the world is all about, and we need the company of others. It's simply that.
And that's the object of emotional branding, to fill the empty places where non-commercial institutions like schools and churches might have once done the job. Brands become more than just a mark of quality. They become an invitation to a longed-for lifestyle, a ready-made identity.
The campaign for iPod is remarkable. When I see the poster as I'm passing by, when I go on the website and it comes to life,
this guy cracks me up.
Track going, and then when I put my little iPod ear pods on, and I see the white cords against my black jacket, I'm in that poster, and the poster is me. And then the music, my music, comes over my iPod, and it's a brand experience.
When you listen to brand managers talk, you can get quite carried away in this idea that they actually are fulfilling these needs that we have for community and narrative and transcendence. But in the end, it is, a laptop and a pair of running shoes. And they might be great, but they're not actually going to fulfill those needs. But which serves them very well, because of course that means that you have to go shopping again.
And if you're a little skeptical, I want you to think right now, how many of you have an iPhone? 90% of you? And yet you could do the same thing with an Android, you could do the same thing with any other type of phone. So why the Apple? Why the iPhone? Because it's got this cult-like devotion to it. And many people say, well, it's just easier to use or whatever. But still, it's all about creating a culture. That's how Apple got so successful. And that's how many of the brands that become so successful are successful. Again, I think I mentioned before, one of the best-run campaigns in the history of campaigns was President Obama's first campaign. He made it cool. He made it popular for people to run around with a backpack that says Obama on it, or to wear a t-shirt. I mean, I had students who knew nothing about politics who supported the campaign just because it was a cool, trendy thing to do. And so the secret to winning an election is making your candidate the cool, trendy thing to vote for. And if you can build that type of cult-like devotion, then you're going to be making a whole lot of money as an advertiser. Even Trump would Make America Great Again is sort of tied into the same cult-like devotion. Whether you like the candidates or dislike the candidates, you have to appreciate what they have done to build their image versus what the other candidates have done. One last look at creating a brand. Again, we keep going back to the Obama campaign because it was one of the most well-run campaigns in the history of campaigns. And this is just one sign of the Obama campaign, the change which the Obama-size poster, so the idea that you could use these blues and whites and reds to sort of make a silhouette of yourself. And there were makers online where you can make these and make it your Facebook profile picture. I know that Facebook isn't quite what it used to be, but back in the day that was the social media before Twitter and Instagram and all those other social medias. So anyways, I took the time, well, last week to Obama-size myself. And there you have it. You can become part of the hope or the change. You can have that profile picture and you can fit in with everybody else who's doing the same thing. That's all we've got for today. Hopefully you learned a little bit about how advertisers start to use your brain to try to get you to vote for their candidates. The use of language, the use of descriptions, the use of emotions is important triggers in our brains to try to get us to support a particular candidate. That and having a good platform is also pretty helpful and pretty useful. So until next time, have a great day.